Hey guys, it's Pastor Todd, and I just want to talk to you for a minute about baptism. And I'm so excited that you're checking this out and interested in learning a little bit more about what it is to be baptized and everything that it means, because it's a very important step in the life of a Christian. And I hope that you don't ever let anybody tell you that it's unimportant, and I hope you don't ever think that it's not, because it's a very important step. So I promise I'll keep this brief. It'll definitely be shorter than a Sunday morning sermon. And just want to talk for just a minute about 4 important reasons why I hope you'll consider being baptized. And the first thing there, if you're taking notes, is that it illustrates Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. It illustrates all 3 of those. Colossians 2:12 says that having been buried with him in baptism, in which you also were raised up with him through faith in the working of God, who raised him from the dead. So we're not literally actually buried, but it's an illustration that we're buried with Christ and raised in new life. When I baptize somebody, I joke with them sometimes that if they've been really, really bad, I might hold them under until they bubble. But, that's a common idea people have, is that somehow my sins are literally actually being washed away. But it's really just an illustration of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. And it's very much like my wedding band. My wedding ring is a public statement that identifies me as a married person, but it's an outward symbol that shows an inward commitment and decision that I've made inside my heart. And when I got married, I remember the preacher said, "Do you, Todd, take Karen to be your wife?" And I was like, no offense to Karen, but I want to marry Aaron. I wanted to make sure I got the ring from the right person and everything. But what would I be saying if I were ashamed of my ring and I went to try to hide it? That would make Aaron pretty unhappy. It'd be saying that I don't want to be identified as being married or as identified as being her. And that's what baptism is all about. It's an outward symbol of the inward decision and commitment you've made in your heart, and the fact that you've surrendered your life to Jesus. It's making that public statement to other people. And if I said, well, my wedding band, it's not a big deal. It's just a symbol. Aaron would say, no, buddy, it's a very big deal. It's a symbol, but it's an important symbol. And by the same token, baptism is a very important illustration of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection, because that's what it symbolizes. And a second thing that it illustrates is that it illustrates my new life as a Christian. Romans 6:4 says, "Therefore we have been buried with him through baptism into death." You might underline that, into death, in order that as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, so we too might walk in newness of life. So you might underline that last phrase too, newness of life. We have new life as believers. Now, when Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River, that was a place where people washed their clothes, they got their drinking water, they fished, they cooled off. That was where everybody hung out. So it was a very public thing that they were doing. So I hope that as you take the step of baptism, you'll also invite people to come and be a part of that. Maybe if you're lucky, when you invite them, they'll get confused and think you're graduating and send you a gift or something. You never know. So the more the merrier. Invite lots of people. I like what one boy said one time. He had asked Jesus into his heart, and then he said, "When can I be advertised?" Instead of baptized. But that's kind of what baptism is it's an advertisement, letting other people know what Jesus has done in your heart. And people might say, "Well, you seem a little different." And you can say, "Well, yeah, I am different. I died. I'm Todd 2.0. I'm a new person. I've got new life." And my baptism is illustrating that. And because of that illustration, that's why we don't baptize infants at our church. Because if you baptize somebody before they've received that new life as a believer, you're kind of putting step 2 before step 1. And we can't really stand with Christ and be identified with him until we actually know him. So what we do is with newborns and young children, we have a dedication time at New Year's and often at Mother's Day where we'll challenge the parents to raise them in a Christian environment. And then we wait and baptize them as they get older and after they've actually made a decision to trust Jesus as their Savior, so that it really does illustrate that new life that they have. The third thing I want you to see about baptism is that we baptize by immersion because Jesus was baptized that way. And immersion just means dunked, to be immersed in the water. And people sometimes ask, well, how should I be baptized? Should I be sprinkled? Should I be poured on? Should I have somebody turn a hose pipe on me? What should I do? And For any Yankees that are watching this video, a hose pipe is a garden hose, okay? That's what that actually is. You might not be familiar with that phrase. But we baptize by immersion, which means we dunk. And the reason we do that is, number one, that's the way Jesus was baptized. We see here in the verse we're going to look at that he's coming up out of the water. But the second reason is immersion best symbolizes that death, burial, and resurrection. Because if somebody goes underwater and they stay underwater, they'll die. It symbolizes that death. But we don't hear very often about people being sprinkled to death in the shower. So it just doesn't really have the same symbolism. Another question people ask sometimes is, can I be baptized again? Maybe it's a wife wanting to be baptized now with her husband, or someone that's really rededicating their life to God. And the answer is absolutely yes. You know, the other thing that Jesus gave the church to commemorate his death, burial, and resurrection was communion, when we take the Lord's Supper. And we do that more than once. And so by the same token, there's nothing wrong, there's no law against being baptized again if you were to choose to do that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But Matthew 3:16 says that after being baptized, Jesus went up immediately from the water. And behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending as a dove and coming upon him. And that word baptize is the Greek word baptizo. And when the King James translators were translating the Bible into English, they kind of created a new English word there, baptize. They just transliterated the letters from baptizo because they didn't want to get involved in the controversy that the church already had about whether to baptize babies or not. So they just said, we'll just create a new word and avoid the controversy. But that word baptizo is a derivative of the same word used in John 13:26 at the Last Supper, when Jesus says, "It is he to whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it." That word dipped. And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot. And you might have seen the Seinfeld episode where George double dips a chip, you know. And it's not that he's sprinkling the sauce on there, he's dipping it, he's dunking it. So that's literally what that word means, is to dip or be immersed. So the fourth thing that I hope that you'll see is that baptism does not save a person, but it is an expected act of obedience. It doesn't save you, but it is an expected next step of obedience. This is a really important point, and a lot of people struggle with this, and maybe you grew up being taught something a little different. If this is something you struggle with, I hope that you'll talk to me about it, because there's a lot of things I could show you in the Bible about this and really dig down, but I just want to just show you one simple verse that I think clears it up really easily. In 1 Corinthians 1:17, where Paul really differentiates between the gospel and baptism. And he says, "For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel." Well, if baptism were part of the gospel, that statement wouldn't make any sense at all. He's saying, hey, I came to preach the gospel. I didn't come to baptize. So that can only mean that baptism is not part of the gospel message. And as we said, some people get confused sometimes and think that baptism actually washes our sin away. But that doesn't happen at baptism. Jesus did that at the cross. Baptism isn't what saves you. Jesus is who saves you. Baptism is simply a symbol of what has already happened in your heart, in your life. Because the Bible says that anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And we become a new creation at that point. And that's what we're celebrating. And that's what that symbolizes. But baptism is not an optional ritual to really delay or postpone. It's something we want to do as soon as we're able to really publicly announce to the world that, hey, this has happened in my life, and I'm not ashamed to be a part of God's family. And it's very much like if you're a Titans fan or some other team's fan, bless your heart, that you would wear a jersey. You know, you would be proud to be identified as being a part of that team. And when we're baptized, we're identified with Christ. And we're saying, hey, my identity from this point on is going to be found in him. And that's who I'm going to be. So I hope that you'll really strongly consider being baptized at our next baptism service. If you don't know exactly the dates and times on that, please contact me. I'd love to get you the information. And I look forward to talking with you further. And I do hope that you'll be baptized very soon. God bless.